What if I told you that Carl Jung uncovered a psychological truth so profound it can unmask any narcissist in seconds? And what if I told you that this truth could be distilled into a single question, one that instantly dismantles their carefully crafted illusion? Stay with me, because by the end of this, you'll hold the psychological master key Jung himself might have used to reveal the truth behind their mask. But first, let me ask you something. Have you ever met someone who leaves you feeling emotionally drained after just one conversation? Someone who makes you second-guess your reality, your perception, even your own worth? Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But what he didn't teach was how to defend ourselves from those who twist that very insight into a tool of manipulation. According to Jung, the human psyche wears what he called the persona, the social mask we put on to fit into society. But he discovered something much darker. Some people don't just wear the mask, they become it. These are the people we now label narcissists. Jung might have called them individuals who've completely severed ties with their authentic self. And here's where it gets unsettling. Jung believed that when someone disconnects from their true self, they become psychologically parasitic. They don't just seek validation, they feed on it. Their entire identity is powered by the admiration and energy of others. But Jung also discovered something else, something that exposes their greatest vulnerability. And I'm going to show you how to use it. Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." For narcissists, that terror runs so deep, they construct elaborate emotional fortresses to avoid ever facing it. They become masters of projection, deflecting their shame, fear, and emptiness onto the people around them. You've seen it before. The coworker who takes credit for your ideas and makes you feel invisible. The romantic partner who hijacks every conversation. The friend who somehow turns your success into their personal superiority. According to Jung, these people live from their shadow, the unconscious parts of the self they refuse to face. While healthy people begin to integrate their shadow, narcissists deny it completely. But Jung noticed a paradox. What appears to be their greatest strength, their unshakable confidence, is also their fatal flaw. And once you grasp this truth, you'll see through the game. Jung believed that healthy individuals undergo a process called individuation, where they bring all parts of themselves into awareness, including the painful ones. Narcissists, on the other hand, remain psychologically frozen, trapped in denial, unable to grow, because to do so would mean facing the void they've been running from all their lives. Jung wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." But narcissists can never look inward. If they did, they'd see the truth. No real self, no internal foundation, only a hollow space that depends on constant praise just to feel like they exist. And this is where Jung's most devastating insight becomes your greatest weapon. He found that narcissists live in what he called a state of psychological inflation. They've fused with their persona so completely, they think the mask is who they are. They've lost all contact with their inner reality, and that makes them desperately dependent on others to keep the illusion alive. This leads to massive projection. Everything they hate about themselves, their fears, inadequacy, emptiness, gets thrown onto others. That's why they gaslight, distort, and blame. It's not about you, it's a smokescreen to avoid their own unbearable truth. But Jung discovered a way to tear this structure down. And it doesn't require a fight, confrontation, or evidence. All it takes is one insight, one truth about how the narcissistic mind works. He said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But narcissists have never known that privilege. They've never discovered who they are beneath the applause and approval. That's why traditional confrontation doesn't work. When you criticize them, you're attacking the masks, not the person and the mask is built to absorb and redirect any threat. It's a psychological fortress, designed to protect the hollow identity within. So, what happens when you bypass the mask entirely and speak directly to what's hiding behind it? This is where Jung's wisdom cuts deepest. A narcissist's greatest fear isn't being seen as flawed, it's being seen as empty. Their ultimate terror is that someone will see through the act and recognize there's nothing substantial behind it. Jung believed that this fear is what fuels their entire behavior pattern. The arrogance, the manipulation, the need to control how others see them. They've become, in Jung's words, possessed by the persona, completely identified with the mask because the real self feels too weak or non-existent to handle reality. But here's the breakthrough. The very thing that gives them power, their need for attention, is also their Achilles heel. Because Jung realized something profound. If you can get someone to face the truth they've spent their whole life avoiding, their whole psychological system begins to collapse. And there's one question that does exactly that. Jung described something called the participation mystique, a kind of unconscious dependency narcissists have on others for support. Without that feedback loop of admiration and recognition, they're forced to confront themselves, and they can't handle what they find. So here's the question, the psychological blade that cuts straight through their illusion. You look them in the eye, calm and centered, and ask, what would you do if you could never impress anyone again? Watch what happens. Jung would have been captivated by this moment. The instant when a narcissist encounters a question their mask cannot deflect. Because this one question doesn't challenge their story. It challenges the foundation of that story, the belief that they only exist through others. According to Jung, this moment strikes directly at their core complex, the hidden wound that shaped their entire personality. They've built their entire life to avoid this one confrontation. And now, with a single question, you've made it unavoidable. You'll see it in their face. Hesitation, confusion, maybe even fear. Because for the first time, they're not looking at you. They're being forced to look within. An almost imperceptible shift appears on their face. Flicker Jung would have recognized instantly. This is the moment when the persona begins to crack. The false self starts to tremble under the weight of its own impossibility. They might smirk, brush it off, or fall silent, but internally, something is unraveling. For the first time, they're being forced to imagine a world where they can no longer survive off the admiration of others, the very fuel that powers their illusion. This is where Jung's understanding of the shadow becomes critical. Because what they're confronting in that moment is everything they've spent their life denying. Carl Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. But narcissists have constructed their entire existence to avoid that kind of consciousness. They've pushed their pain, fear, and shame so deeply into the shadow that their connection to their real self is severed. When you ask that one question, what would you do if you could never impress anyone again? You're not just questioning their behavior. You're challenging the very foundation of their identity. Because Jung believed narcissists never learned how to exist for themselves. Their entire sense of self is parasitic, reliant on others for energy, identity, and meaning. That's why Jung would have seen this moment as the ultimate psychological intervention. It doesn't allow for escape. They can't use charm, blame, or deflection. The mask has no answer for it. Because to respond honestly, they'd have to admit there's nothing behind the performance, and for them, that's unbearable. Jung discovered that narcissists can't engage with true authenticity, not because they won't, but because they don't remember what it feels like. Their world is constructed around control. Controlling perception, controlling emotion, controlling outcomes. But this question bypasses all of that. It goes straight to the void they've spent their lives trying to deny. And according to Jung, once you understand their psychological blueprint, the next step is not about changing them. It's about reclaiming yourself. He called it individuation, not their individuation. The moment you realize that you don't have to participate in their psychological games is the moment you reclaim your authentic power. This is where Jung's wisdom becomes more than theory, it becomes your shield. Because understanding them isn't about fixing them, it's about freeing yourself from their gravitational pull. Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But when it comes to narcissists, he might have added, sometimes understanding someone is exactly what teaches you when to walk away. You can't heal someone who refuses to admit they're wounded. You can't love someone into wholeness. You can't make someone face a shadow they've spent their entire life hiding from. But what you can do is see the pattern, understand the psyche, and refuse to be a player in their emotional theater. Because here's the truth, Jung knew well. Your peace of mind isn't dependent on someone else's psychological wellness. Your authenticity isn't diminished by someone else's illusion. And your power is never truly threatened by manipulation. It just gets obscured. According to Jung, the ultimate act of individuation is to live free from others' projections. That means knowing that what narcissists do isn't about you, it's about their refusal to face what's inside themselves. Carl Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is being who you are. Narcissists will never know that privilege, and some will try to make sure you never experience it either. But you don't have to fall for that. So, the next time you face a narcissist, remember Jung's most profound insight. You hold the power. You possess the question that breaks their illusion. But more importantly, you now understand their psychology, and that knowledge is your protection. Because the narcissist's greatest fear isn't being wrong, it's being seen, and once you truly see them, they lose their grip on your mind forever. That, my friends, is how you use Jungian psychology, not just to expose a narcissist, but to reclaim your authentic self. Stay grounded, stay wise, and never forget, their greatest terror is your greatest freedom. Thank you so much for staying with me through this exploration. If today's discussion brought you insight or strength, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with someone who needs to hear it.